This seemingly small creature is causing a big buzz at all levels of society, from rural to urban and local to global. And the reason has to do with the growing body of evidence that their health and population is in danger from multiple sources. And it's not just honeybees. Native and wild bees are at risk as well. Politicians, scientists, farmers, and the general public are all talking about our insect pollinators and the critical role they play in the ecosystems we depend on and the food that we eat. We'd like to take a few minutes to share with you what has been happening, why it matters, and what steps we must take to stand a chance at saving the bees. So what's going on? Let's start with honeybees. Sometime around 2006, beekeepers all over the U.S. started noticing that their bees were disappearing. They'd open up their hives only to find them empty. It wasn't long before the term colony collapse disorder was coined. Beekeepers normally lose 10 or 15% of their hives every winter, but this number has been increasing every year. In 2014, beekeepers across the U.S. lost 42% of their colonies. Honeybee mortality was even higher in Minnesota, reaching upwards of 50% of hives. There are a couple of things going on. A class of agricultural broad-spectrum insecticides called neonicotinoids is one big reason. Neonics are the most prevalent insecticide today. They are used as seed coatings, foliar sprays, and soil applications. Not only do they persist in the environment for long periods of time, but they can be absorbed by plant tissues and appear in bee-lethal quantities in floral nectar and pollen. Another reason are bee pests that are being passed from hive to hive as bees are shipped all over the country for crop pollination. Pests like the Varroa destructor mite, which influences the bee life cycle, and the fungal parasite Nosema apis, which causes bee dysentery. On top of all of that, bees, especially wild bees, are losing important habitat and floral resources. With most of our country's land planted in huge tracts of flower-poor corn and soy, and lawns mowed and kept free from dandelion and clover flower, that nectar and pollen that bees need is becoming harder and harder to find. The public has been responding to this growing issue here and all over the world. Today, the bees' decline is not only a scientific issue. Increasing numbers of people are showing interest in what is happening and wants to take part in action to protect pollinators and help beekeepers. In Minnesota, events are organized every year to alert the general public to the problems related to pollinators. Whether it is the Pollinator Party in Lindale Park Garden, bringing together bees, scientists, beekeepers, and the public, or beekeepers in the state fair organizing honey tastings and explaining bee biology and behavior to the public, the growing masses are increasingly aware that these charismatic creatures are an important part of the world we live in. Pollinators are declining, and a very large and diverse public are demonstrating their desire for conservation and a sense of concern about this environmental issue. Government administrations have recognized the issue as well. The Environmental Services Unit of the Health Department has created a website on how to create pollinator habitat and pollinator-friendly practices. The city of Minneapolis has made it easier for residents to apply for a permit to keep bees on their property. And this summer, Governor Dayton himself made Minnesota the first state to protect pollinators via executive order. Every year, honeybees alone contribute over $15 billion to the value of U.S. agriculture. This is because over a third of the food Americans eat every day depends directly on animal pollinators. Think apples, watermelon, raspberries, pumpkins, almonds, chocolate, and even coffee, just to name a few. That doesn't even include essential crops like canola oil and cotton. And in 2006, the industry lost about 10 million beehives, valued at $2 billion. While many of our crops are pollinated by domestic honeybees, recent research is pointing to the value and effectiveness of wild bee species at enhancing fertilization and yield of important crops. Take Minnesota for example. Apples are Minnesota's largest fruit crop, producing 18 million pounds every year, worth $9 million. Apples, along with other important Minnesota crops like berries, sunflower, canola, all depend on good pollination for fruit set, and native wild pollinators like bumblebees are especially efficient compared to honeybees. The state of Minnesota has already made important progress on pollinator conservation. We ask that you continue to support efforts to protect bees and other pollinators. Legislation that tightens regulations on bee-lethal insecticides and enhances and expands pollinator habitat will go a long way to securing this ecologically and economically vital service.